walking session today. The good thing is that I'll be able to start on my back on carnivore. Not good for the critters, but I was thinking about something that Olav Phillips, that was I think the last person interviewee on Sean Patrick Hazlitt's channel through a glass darkly. How he's talking about. Sorry, I don't even haven't even really gone into the restroom except to take a quick leak. I'm gonna see if I can do maybe an hour or two of walking and get 5 miles in. I was thinking about something that he said. Very fascinating interview because it's pertinent for people that are going through discovery, the process of discovery. And that is to say that he talked about kindness and benevolence and just, not necessarily going out of your way, but begin the process of doing something that you don't like. Like, people are so fickle about the channels that they watch. Even if somebody seems to resonate the truth, it's like, oh, no, I don't need to decide to do that. And it's like, have you ever watched a channel on YouTube or subscribed to something that you really don't really like and seen, like, have you ever tried to make someone's video go viral? I'm not talking about my channel at all, so don't get me wrong there. It's like the benevolence that we express could simply be like, I like to watch Tammy and Kevin Dunn's channel. It has nothing to do with anything. And they did like Oreo cookie reviews. You can take that as far as you want to. Ironically, Tom Delore, the fitness physiology, sports science, sports nutrition science guru, that's got all the millions of subscribers, that gives out great pertinent information. He's talking about this in a similar way as Danny Jones, who just did an interview on his channel with someone who's stating you eat 12 Oreo cookies a day and you'll lower your LDLs by as much as 200 points. So it's like, but he's talking specifically, like he's putting it in terms that people like to hear or are programmed to hear. But the studies were done specifically on sweet potatoes in the range of 50 to 100 grams of carbohydrates. And he's saying, utilizing carbohydrates that are considered bad carbohydrates, that is, ample amounts of sugar, bleach, flour, things like that, will actually lower your LDLs in studies, in research. And it's something that's not talked about because it doesn't go along with the popular narrative, right? I guess that's what I'm discussing, is just the popular narrative. What normal is and what normalizing is has more to do with normalizing of a popular narrative that is following along the discourse of what's commonly accepted. And we see throughout history that leads to lynching, that leads to witch trials, that leads to cacistocracies. And there's no way that you can proclaim that a meritocracy, right, where we live in a government that's supposedly driven by the merits of what we've earned, right, when people can be cancel cultured, blacklisted, and outright shunned by the multitude. That's really, when you get down to the essence of what social networking is, the likes, the friending, the unfriending, that's what we've created. We've created this armchair proxy to where it's not far from Hunger Games and other things like that, where you'll be able to push a button, or more like Total Recall, right? You'll be able to push a button and electrocute someone. You think that that might be far-fetched, but it's not. You know, it's not. I think the first person going by way of economy was just executed. I don't know anything more about that than just reading the headline to a quick article some days ago, using natural gas. I think it was a natural gas execution, right? So people are beginning to see themselves as garden mulch, you know. They're actually resigning the constituents of their parts, the leftover debris that goes back into the inorganic properties, dust, if you will. Like, I'm dead, right? But then we get into areas like Diane Pasulka has brought up, the professor in religion. I was incorrect. I say a lot of incorrect things, but I like to bring up subjects whether or not I'm at all well versed on them or not. And then I will correct myself. And she is a professor in North Carolina. She's practicing. She's not retired. And she brings up really good points. About such subjects, but I'm trying to cram in about 2 hours of continuous walking today. It'll probably be a shorter one. My kid's home back from a couple of weeks being gone, and I got to get in some great walking in that time frame. And it was raining and storming outside in California like it was everywhere over the last like week and a half straight. So it was raining today a little bit, and now it seems to have subsided. You know, why do I prefer to walk indoors? Why do I prioritize the distance and the volume and the undisturbed tranquility to actually meditate and to gather my energy, as opposed to what I believe is a false notion to go outside, expose precancerous, like my mole here and other things that I got from long distance walking outside, deal with traffic lights, passing homeless encampments. Like, does the smell of the ocean air and the infrequent sunbeams on my face and the feeling of that sort of exotic feeling of endogenous alchemy, right? And endocrine responses, does that sensation and that feeling override my need, my ability to train? And it's kind of like, well, the best answer to that is, I think en masse, is every gym in the world would be closed down if that were the case. People prefer to, like, it's almost like you look at the isolation exercises that these machines are based on, where all you have to do is go pick up a dumbbell and go you know, over to the incline bench press and do your preacher curls there, instead of having to isolate yourself on some $6,000 preacher curl machine, you know. But there's a certain novelty and convenience that people enjoy, right? To have a certain station, and it's really a reflection of a compartmentalization. It's not a bad thing, in other words. Like, I guess from a very rudimentary and primal sense, we could say that a cave, right, is far too much room than we need than to lay down, and set up camp nomadically, right? Or that a teepee is far too much construction and using animal skin, and reinforcing it is more than we need. It's superfluous. And I guess the argument would be is there's a feeling that human beings need that's part and parcel to safety, right? There's a buffering that we require. And when you look down through an electron microscope, the same thing seems to be occurring with microorganisms. And it's not only a feeling that we have, there's a perpetuation of energy. In other words, the human being extends beyond what the visual, what the proteins are telling us is where the human organism that we are existentially viewing begins and ends. There's an aura, right? There's an aura. There's an electromagnetism that occurs. There's a strong, weak nuclear force phenomenon. And from certain perspectives, where that aura can actually be photographed, whether or not that's, heavily debated or not, it's been going on for quite a few decades. And the pictures are very interesting, is that on some level it becomes undeniable. We see this with vegetation, we see this with flowers, with floral growth. That is the byproduct of a certain amount of space, but then you would argue there's a certain amount of stimulus that one needs. And I would argue back and say that once you are meeting your physical requirements, your body, your mind, your soul, that entire matrix accues to and gains a familiarity to your environmental surroundings and creates the concoction of happiness. And that diseases like diseases like MS, multiple sclerosis, are thought to originate from a lack of sunlight. But I would even further argue a point there and say that have you done that with people who are very well exercised? I think a good example of that would probably be Brian Johnson, right? Even though I don't bring him up very, very often, I do subscribe to his channel. I do like to stay up on things. I belong to channels of people that I am 100%. If you ask me personally what I believe in, and what those doxastic, I had a hard time pronouncing that yesterday, belief systems might be, right? Systems of belief might be, to really look at that, I need to belong to Scottish Rite Masonic channels. And I need to listen regularly and remind myself after reading Morals and Dogma, I need to remind myself of the history with the Masonic order. I even need to go in and study the Book of Mormon and other things, which I've done, in order to really know that I'm not looking at things from an existential view, that I'm really putting on the cap or, the laboratory coat of not approaching a subject with any sort of bias. Like, let's give this a shot. Obviously, the bias that you have is what your on-running program is. And when you remove all comforts and levels of comfort, and you look at something as raw as you possibly can, you're just left with the fundamental principles that keep you going, right? And with all that long-winded little, diatribe there, soliloquy, right? Which it really was what all of this is. It just happens to be recorded. Is I'm going to be stepping in the gym and getting some really good footage that I'll be putting up on Rogue Beast Warrior channel real soon. I'm waiting very patiently for something that has been promised to me legally for quite a while, and my patience wore thin months ago. But in that, I plan on getting a nice 360 camera, running some races, getting involved in some 10K races, and enjoying things, right? And so I thought, while I'm waiting, why not get in the best shape of my life, right? And so 4 months and 1 week ago, I started doing this indoor training. Prior to that, I was walking outside around beautiful Monterey Bay in California. And I would leave very early, I would go on my 5 or 6 mile walks. I recorded some of them and put them up on this channel doing lives, where I'm doing the same exact thing. And I just didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it. I did not enjoy it. It could be that I'm not all that high on the area or the beach, right? Everyone has their different experiences. When I look out on the ocean, I see the remnants of, and the obviousness. When I see the salted sea, I see the remnants and the obviousness of geoengineering, of terraforming. That's all I see. That's all I see when I look at a sunset. Even though, like the picture on this channel of the sunset is actually at a park in Sacramento, where the birds are, out there. So many birds will fly through there from different areas of the country and probably the world, like the geese from Canada. And you'll see the place change and transition month after month, especially season after season. You'll go through and you'll see the ice on where the pond's almost frozen up. It's so cold. And it does get cold in California. It's about the wind chill factor. I think a lot of people, I've lived in other areas, other states. I've lived in Colorado around Keystone and Arapahoe Basin. If you want to know about a winter, if you want to know about being treated like an outsider and marginalized, and have your kids treated like utter shit just because you're from California. You can't. There's something that the millennials have done, and particularly those under the millennials, the Y2. I don't know. I can't keep track of that. And by the way, those are all authored titles, right? That someone writes a book, everybody takes it seriously enough, and they say, "Oh, these are." I saw something yesterday where that's totally skewed and screwed up to the point where somebody was making a claim that Arnold Schwarzenegger was part of the X generation. It's like, no, he's definitely a baby boomer. But then you get into this and you're arguing semantics from someone else's science, someone else's literature, their authorship, and you begin to see that this isn't anything. This is creating a false parameter of the timeline that doesn't really even exist, I slap kids. Why don't you go away, Timmy? Are you so bored? Huh? Are you an incel? Are you one of those incels? This isn't a channel where I put up with shit, boy. He says, I slap kids, bro. Who are you talking to? Obviously, I'm talking to you. And you're making a fool out of yourself. Go away, boy. See what I'm doing, Timmy? You're sitting on your ass right now, and I'm walking 12 miles. I'm doing it expressing opinions, but I'm mostly expressing my principles. And in a little while, I'm going to be taking this protein. And then I'm going to be going in here, and I'm going to be doing some pull-ups. What are you doing today, Timmy? Huh? What are you doing? Are you tiptoe through the tulips? Probably don't even know who that is. Tiny Tim? Don't be tiny, Tim. Don't be a tiny person. Think big. Think broad strokes. Because I go live here while I'm doing something, which is continuous training, gradual intensity training. And I'm a NASM performance enhancement specialist, a NASM corrective exercise specialist. I've had over 25 certifications in my time. I've worked for Equinox Fitness, 24-hour fitness, Club One. I've had my own businesses, and I have instructed thousands and thousands of people. I turned into a fat, disgusting blob out of choice to refute the corporeal. And now I'm getting in shape for all the right reasons. And if that's not of interest to you, then go away. Because we still live in some form of democracy where you can choose who and what you want. But very soon, that's not going to be the case. So I suggest you go watch some Tucker Carlson or tuck your thing between your legs and watch videos of Biden molesting young people over and over again, and look in the mirror and call yourself woke. Slap yourself on the you know what and change your clothes and run for Congress. But what we do here is we just keep on moving, and we don't mute ourselves or our opinionation. But also, it's a free democracy. It's a free place to express yourself. But if you want to think in a very mundane and trivial way and express yourself as such, and you think that's entertaining while you sit on your ass, scraping the Cheetos off your chest that your mommy just dropped off for you, well, why don't you gain an opinion, and why don't you earn an opinion before you express that opinion, right? That's the way it is. Who are you talking to? And you spell two wrong. Two is also, like T-O-O. It's also. It's including. But that's why I say, when it asks me, is this for kids? I say, no, it's not for kids. Because I don't know if I just want to say fuck or shit or express myself in some other way. But does that demean my principles? Does that dirty me? Is that a deviation away from purity? I guess, like anything, it's how much conviction you have behind what you're saying, and whether or not you have the vocabulary to display another expletive, right? And sometimes fuck or shit is the only thing. I mean, it's a part of, for instance, the word umpire was originally spelled numpire, right? And because it was mispronounced so often, it went down in the dictionary, and it morphed into what we use today, which is umpire. And there are many words like that. that it's a general consensus and the word use abroad. And this gets into the dialectical urban dictionary and the exchange of certain words that will be used and have been used, like, wow, that's hella good, you know. It shows a demonstrative value, whereas you probably would have been burned at the stake if you used that hundreds of years before. Just like the advent of the J is a relatively new use. Just like Isis means hail Zeus, and that's not a Billy Carson thing. Jordan Maxwell was talking about that well over 10 years ago. But otherwise, what I do is I revert back to this being a display on the surface of where I will throw my videos up and my progress that are based on training on Rogue Beast Warrior, and I don't really concern this channel with that. This is more of a it really is a freedom of expression. But don't get shy when I put you right. I'm 54 years old. I've had 2 boys, and no, I don't slap people around. I've never hit a woman in my life. I'm not hot-tempered. I'm somebody who can go head to head with you about most any subject if you were worthy of subject's expression, and talk about a myriad of different things because I've been interested, and therefore there's something slightly interesting. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But as far as you testing my metal, I'll show you my metal, man. Do push-ups. I challenge you to doing 50 push-ups right now. Cold. So I challenge you to doing 60 push-ups in 1 minute. 1 minute. Let's see. Can you do 1 push-up per second? Where'd you go? Because I guarantee that we would both walk away learning something. I would get up and I wouldn't be like, "Oh wow, I'm stronger than you. I'm better than you." I'd be like, "Holy shit, that was hard." My mouth wrote, like, I might get 55. I might get 57. I do push-ups pretty regularly. I can tell you I can do it. But in the memory, we always think that things are easier and that we have somehow attained. That's what's great about fitness. We think we have attained something that later on we have to rediscover over and over and over. It's like Groundhog Day. It's the nightmare that never ends. But the thing that we get from that, and why it's so easy to train us and control us to this mouse utopia, is that our endocrine systems like it. It likes it. It goes back to the feeder, like cocaine. It needs those endorphins. It needs that endocrine system and those endocrine responses, right? And so even the healthiest thing. So Kurt Jamungal, I always like to talk about recent things that I have watched, has Dennis McKenna, Terrence McKenna's brother, on. So I'd say that's a really interesting interview to watch. And it gets into the nature of psychedelics and so forth. And I did, let's say, experiment with some acid when I was a teenager. Once I did a few too many hits. And I wouldn't say I enjoy the experience. I've tried mushrooms. I'm not a drug addict, and I don't condone or condemn for doing drugs, but I don't think it's a way through, you know. And I think that fringe drugs like, and I've smoked weed for many years, but I'm not an addictive personality for people who require an altered state of mind. I would urge people to start exercising first and to feel the high and the phenomenon that you get just by playing with your carbohydrates. Like, have you ever cut out carbohydrates for long periods of time and eaten carbs? You will be staring at your finger and tripping out more. I'm telling you, you might think that showing that type of restraint and then restraint to indulgence, which would be like more Epicurean, right? If you looked at it as a school of thought, because there are forms, there's a Stoic form involved there, you know, the adherence to Stoic concepts and ideas, but that leads into, if you want to study up on it, leads into more Neoplatonism, right? Because you're beginning to transition, just like the doxastic belief system, right? You are beginning to transition to a multi-dimensional belief system that starts to look conical when it's described in literature, and it begins to take on the shape of a pyramid, because that's what ends up happening. Is you can't just describe something in a two-dimensional flat surface. The dimension and substance starts to become something that has to be described in a multi-dimensional, multifarious way. And then you get into the pyramid, and when you get into that, you have to start studying things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you see that there is no distinction nor separation between sociology, economy, and your own freedom of expression. And then you will begin to see why it is vastly and grandly important, right? Vastly meaning that you end up affecting and infecting the family members around you, the people around you, right? That you are not just a localized event, right? And that you have an energy, you give a footprint, a carbon footprint, if you will, and that you affect all those around you with your energy. So that's why it's important that you can't just spout out and say things and make claims that you can't back up. In other words, you're not somebody, Timmy, that can sit there and spout out vitriol and diatribe without the consequence of, well, then step up, boy. You see what I'm saying? Not everybody who has an opinion and goes to a town hall meeting and expresses their gripe needs to be able to get into a wrestling ring. I'm not saying that. And that's kind of the time we live in right now, and it's bullshit. But if you're sort of a fearless person, but you've never had fear, and you've never had to fear for where your daily meal is or where your next meal comes from or the clothes on your back, then, and you're talking to a seasoned veteran, right, about war, there's a real discrepancy there, right? And I'm not saying that I'm a seasoned veteran from war, but in a sense, I've lived 54 years. I've had my successes and my failures. But am I also telling you that you need to respect your elders? Hell no. Hell no. Go walk past any homeless camp and you'll see that just doesn't hold weight. And so you start to wonder, how could people at one time have lived under that sort of delusion or paramnesia, right? And it's like, well, it was chosen. It's like Zuzu's pedals and all that bullshit, right? A wonderful life. It's not a wonderful life, you know. But you can believe that it's a wonderful life at times, in time signatures, and it's going to be given to you just like you're stuck in a mouse utopia, just like you're going up to the, you know, you're the three mice that got plucked out and got thrown in the freaking the cocaine ring, you know, the plasticine tank, the cocaine plasticine tank. One might walk out thinking like John McAfee, Another one might, be put into the next experiment adjacent to, and see if that 100 monkey theory, where pervading knowledge and information seems to be expressed without the physical attribution of showing another monkey how to do a specific act, right? Physically, but it's just known, right? But you got to understand that there are also physical impulses with the inner ear, that there is something that's what metaphysics is all about. It gets into an area where even the physical learning doesn't stop in the physical state. And I think things that seem like, where you jump broadly toward apports, egregore, right? Tulpa, right? And fantasy concepts, and where you look at telekinesis, or even the ability to be able to move an object, potentially, possibly, without actually touching it visually with your hands. I think that some people exhibit a greater magnetic field, Thank you, man. Alta Maxi, welcome. Welcome. Yeah, I'm awake. I'm alive. I'm informed, and I want to be more informed. And on this station, this isn't a town hall. Like this isn't the judgmental guy who climbed into the cave in the 1980s. I look like that, right? And got stuck in the Reagan era. I remember it quite well. I'm not of political interest, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. Where you don't believe in God, but God believes in you. You don't believe in politics, but politics is going to believe in you. It believes in you because it knows your social security number. It gave man's identity. Ooh. So how many other people do this? So I'll be having more interesting content. I like to watch things. Project. How about you? I've subscribed to him and unsubscribed many times. And I'll tell you, this goes back to Olav Peterson, Through a Glass Darkly, the last interview that I think Sean Patrick Hazlitt did, or Hazlitt. I hate to mispronounce people's names, but he was talking near the end of his interview there, his second interview. Very intriguing. Talks about the Black Lodge, Aleister Crowley, many subjects that people are very interested in today, whether on the fringe and they're just starting to discover this. See, for a long time, people wouldn't even touch this stuff because they were told that they were opening the door to the devil, right? And so another good program to watch in conjunction with that is a channel is Where Did the Road Go with Soraya. He talks about such concepts. Have you ever looked into, or are you aware of the Seth writings? Seth is a conjured entity, you could say, or the better description would be a channeled entity. See, the difference is that channeling can occur when you just have an open mind, but you have to be real careful with this, right? Because in a sense, a muse represents and expresses a neutrality, right? Of, no, it's not a demon. But if you trace back the term demon or daimon far enough, and you've done due diligence and research, you'll find that they weren't seen as a negative force or a negative entity. I'm not saying to invite demons into yourself or your life. I'm saying that if you do, and you use a medium that is agreed upon, and you put enough symbols there, and this gets into the areas of John Dee creating symbols, energy pathways, but when you get into the area of studying in particular, of particular interest, you can't just say, I'm going to digest this. Like John Dee is, you have to kind of look at Thomas Aquinas, John Locke. And these days, when I say those things, I'm not saying that in a highbrow way. Like, I've read this and you might not have. So that puts me in a place, or you have too. Let's talk about it and bullshit each other with famous quotes that that we just use on a bullshit service level, but we never get down to the truth, the meat, the matter, right? Even those terms, the meat, the matter. Think about that. It doesn't matter. Does matter matter? Is this matter? Am I actually even touching that? Right? So what is matter? I mean, if we were being honest, we would say that's not nucleus, right? And then you get into the nucleus and you're looking at energy, right? But then you can even break that up further and go, what the fuck is this? And I think the real question is what's powering us, right? So John Dee was looking at that. And if you're going to look at that and you're going to have an interest in the things that I'm talking about here on this channel, that, yeah, I'm going to do some interviews, right? I am. I'm going to talk to some people. I'd like to be able to set the channel up and make things nice and pretty and put some lights behind me. I've been in that situation before, but I just decided not to do that. And I would love to interview someone like Nathaniel Gillis. I would love to come up with some really good questions. Do you mew, cuz? No, actually, I appreciate that. Is it? I'm skinny. This side, I lost these teeth over here. So this side, right, it's totally asymmetrical. I wasn't always like that. I did play with things when I was doing this where my jaw is being pulled back and it even kind of hurts because I'm always looking at the phone. I was doing things like where I put my jaw forward or I look up and I stretch while I'm walking. And so if you want to work your core, you lean back, feel your back right now. You'd think that by leaning back, your lower, your erecte spinae, right? Your lower back muscles would be engaged, right? Not what's happening. Feel your core. Raise your arms over your head, and then start to go through a walk. That's a big reason why I do indoor walking right there. Is I don't like to look like a crazy jackass. But about 12 years ago, when I was really high, when I say I was high level in the training field, I used to train some notable people for Equinox Fitness. I worked 17 hours a day. I was kicked out of there. I wasn't fired, but I was expressing myself too much. My son started to exhibit some serious behavior. I needed to take leave, and then I was basically cancel cultured. Then I went and got a $180,000-$200,000 a year job as an elite trainer. Went and did that for 2 or 3 weeks. And I started to wonder, why in the fuck can't I just jump right back into this, right? And what had happened is that I was being released from the social conditioning. And I started to follow this trail. And people started to hand me these books out of the blue wherever I would go. I went down to LA. I went and worked for the Magic Johnson's 24-hour fitness down there. I was trying to find a balance, right? And because I love training, I love sports sciences, sports nutrition. And I've always seen how when we get into these upper levels, like Terrence McKenna, wouldn't it be great to have conversations with him now, today? Wouldn't it be neat if these people understood that it's not just, there's like what Olav Peterson calls UFO knots, right? You have these psychonauts, right? What's the term? I'm getting it wrong. But you have these people who go into and elicit a certain Hi, I'm new. Can I get a shout out? Yep. Delex Ukles or Usles? Um, welcome. Welcome. Yeah, I'm going to try to be doing a lot of lives on this station. And then, and I've been around since 2008. I have erased all of my, I used to be heavily into fitness. I was one of the first, you could say I'm like a grandfather or a godfather of that first fitness wave that went through YouTube. When I was working as a high level trainer, I would do videos and I maintained like under 5% body fat. Very recently, I'm coming out of something where I lost about 80 or 90 pounds. I'm embellishing. It was more like 80 pounds. Um, and that's something we have to get away from doing because those little white lies, those things where we embellish, become extremely important to catch ourselves on. When I would tell clients to do food diaries, I'd be like, you really have to be honest because when you reflect on how many calories you ate, you're always going to leave 200 or 300 out. You're going to be like, oh, that didn't matter. Because once we put something down on paper, we want to be perfect, right? But when we look in the mirror, we see the blinding truth. We see the age, we see the wrinkles, we see everything. And that is the best thing for you to look at because then you start to realize, who am I? You know, who am I? And I think it begins that way from a surface level with a lot of people. Okay, yeah. So I'm not really talking about any specific subjects today, and I apologize for that. Usually there's something a little bit more interesting that I'm discussing. What I'm doing right now is my son's got a day off, so I'm trying to pack in as much walking as I can before he gets back in a couple hours. Again, the reason that I do this is continuous training, train when and where you can, right? But what I represent is that when I'm outside and I've got this 360 cam near the end of the month and I'm doing gym sessions, that I'm going to be talking about these subjects and not separating them while I'm doing that type of stuff. Even when I'm training to go do like a 10K race that I want to do, walking long distance, right? And kind of a marathon capacity. I want to be able to film that, record that, and show that I'm maintained and contained within the self to where who I am talking right here through dialectical exchange by myself in a kind of a dark room. And the reason that I do this isn't just because I have kind of like some precancerous stuff going on with my skin. It's also research has shown that the stimulus that we get from bright lights, granted, it is healthy to get a little bit of UV light. If you ever look at Brian Johnson's station channel, which I do subscribe to, that even if you're not interested in anti-aging and all those things, you're interested in autophagy, you're interested in cell growth, you're interested in health, and people get lost in terms, and that's all it is. It goes part and parcel to that. By the way, a really good book to read that's an introduction to that is Lives of a Cell, particularly Watson and Crick. So those are some good ones. And also a book that's a little dated now called DNA, right? DNA. And what this leads into is other people who made such claims about the benefits of health, nutrition, nutrients, like Linus Pauling, who assisted Watson and Crick in the double helix construction. It's a constructor theory. Though we can go down and look at it and validate it, very soon we're going to be able to do that with particles too. We just need to work out. It's kind of like when no one could get a good picture of the sun and then they realized it was the radiation that was coming off of the sun. So new equipment had to be used, right? And so the same thing's happening there, where it's not the electrical impulse that we have to start respecting. I believe it's the strong and weak nuclear forces that we have to specifically guide some equipment use toward, that'll allow us to look into the deeper scale. Kaylee Rouse, hi, welcome. Yeah, so again, a myriad of different subjects. Do you have any subjects that you would like to discuss or talk about? I'm trying to ask people that because I want to start petitioning some folks such as Nathaniel Gillis for some interviews. He pretty much, the reason so is he pretty much grants anyone an interview. And I think as long as there's an interest in the area that he's investigating, which is, he calls himself a demonologist, but then he distinguishes and very well understands that that's a very broad term, and that he's not talking about demons, these entities, and that you could be looking at age-old teachings, writings that go back to the Hindu faith, religion, philosophy. And you could also even look at Dianetics, and that there is an undeniable proof. You know, if you just look at Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, Aleister Crowley, that whole Babylon working shit, I mean, magic is real. And it seems that that is the thing that's being suppressed in us, around us, to us, and that we are turned against one another to compete with one another. And we're reaching a new age, a new stage that's beyond enlightenment, where there's shared concepts, shared ideas, a networking, if you will, right? So I very much believe in that. No, I'm playing. What, you're not high? Joking. I didn't. What were you saying that you're? Yeah, all I got is high. And you can be high in the best way possible. And if you've never walked 25 miles, if you've never cut back severely on carbohydrates and then tasted a bite of, and I don't recommend doing this, because the first thing you do when you go into major carb depletion is you start to think about the food that you had 24 hours before, or the alcohol. If you had a beer 24 hours before, the first thing you're thinking about is a beer. Like, man, a beer would be nice. Then about 2 or 3 days after that, you're sweating all that out. If it's your first time going through that and detoxifying, then you may be starting to think, wow, if you don't allow your blood sugar to get too low. So I have something that I always recommend to people that's called protein custard. You could do protein ice cream, to where you're not just thinking about satiety, but you're thinking about the flavor of something, right? And that that you really enjoy it, right? Yeah, it probably didn't give it to you because I was inappropriate. If you're not like outright right being crude, you could say what you want. Like if somebody's like Timmy over here, if you're coming on the channel saying I slap kids, right? So when someone makes a statement like that, I want to know, are you referring to me? I don't slap kids, right? I don't do things like that. I'm not a criminal, but I also, there's a philosopher named Michel Foucault, and if you go on Michael Segru's channel and you're interested in philosophy, you'll see how he took the Nietzschean concept beyond good and evil, in particular, because that was a definite and specific area of interest and study with Michel Foucault, and it's spelled Foucault. And he didn't believe in corporal or punishment in the penal system. What is that? Is that the World Trade Centers? I can't understand what that is, man. And so, yeah, I don't believe in the death penalty. I don't believe in jails. I don't believe in prisons. And you might go, well, that would be utter chaos. But do you understand that the chaos would work itself out, and people would begin to very quickly, right? That you see the violence that people snap to when they're in Walmart and they're fighting over the last bag of fucking Cocoa Puffs, right? It doesn't take much. You think that we wouldn't be able to just level things out? I think most of us are kind of afraid of that because it's kind of like, well, I'm in a weakened state. Why do you think I'm doing what I do? Why do you think I'm in my mid 50s and I diet and train all the time? But I did this 20 or 30 years ago, 40 years ago, right? And I'm not saying that I've been consistent, but I've gone back to this. When you realize that if you are putting value into yourself through your own development, and you may start out with the information that you take in, it becomes more refined, and you start to value yourself in an intellectual way, right? And then you start to feel and see a permeating energy from that and a connection to other people. And then you realize that there's like this divine idea of a matrix through matriculation, where just like what's happening between you and I right now, as an individual at home, you are channeling and sharing information that grows into something more when it's expressed and there's a connection, right? And that's metaphysics, right? That's metaphysics. So then when you get into the metaphysics, you start to think of things through epistemological systems of order, but ontological, where you can't say whether or not something is spiritual, psychoanalytical. You know, you might hide behind Freud. You might even think that you're safe posturing yourself behind someone like Carl Jung or Terence McKenna. But once you go down that rabbit hole, there's this juxtaposed or antithetical position that you put yourself in where all you want to do is normalize. So do I have things that aren't all, complex and doxastic, where you have to describe your system of belief? Yeah. I like to watch really simple things and sort of chill out, like Tammy and Kevin Dunn, different food channels, the whole ASMR thing. Yeah, I think there's need for that. I think there's need for the simple and the simplistic, and I think that the fact that we're on a forum such as this, and we would never meet each other outside. Like if this was 30 years ago, we happened to be at the same park. You're feeling kind of bored, so you're going to go over near the pond. I'm walking around the pond. There's spider senses that give us inaccurate information that's based on wives' tales, but they're based on fallacies. But the problem is 1 out of 1,000,000 times you're going to meet some psycho, you're going to meet some freak, and that is someone who wishes you harm. But when you get into Michel Foucault's work, he's kind of expressing it like, no matter what anybody's done, like, take care of it. Like, the masses would take care. That's really what he's saying. He's saying that, and then even more so, one tribal system will stand against another that seems to be unjust, right? And that everything seems to work itself out. And this is very close to what was going on when you look at Michael Segru's last lecture, where he gets into Göbekli Tepe, the hunter-gatherers, and why 10,000 years ago or so, thereabouts, they would come together and fashion these huge limestone, multi-ton, headless structures out of flint. Like, there was no reason for them to come together. And I conjecture that what Nathaniel Gillis and Robert Bigelow, the multi-billion-dollar aerospace mogul and former owner of Skinwalker Ranch, that they're quite aware. And if you want to see some good interviews with him, go on Jeffrey Mishlov's, is it Mishlove? Yeah. Channel, New Thinking Aloud. And what I conjecture is these entities have been around forever. And if it was just expressly wishing you harm, we would all be dead right now. If it was just taking your soul and morphing you into something like that was likened to putty. By the way, we share over 33% of our DNA with common yeast. So when you get into these discrepancies where you're talking about likeness and likelihood, DNA itself could be seen as the crux to a transitional state, right? That all those proteins and all those expressions, right, that are in one animal or one person is an identifying cymatic. So you get into cymatics, it's like this frequency, right? It's almost like topographically the reading of like a laser reading of a disc, right? That it's topographically influencing us, and that our DNA, from an internal sense, is giving off a similar signature, and that this atmosphere that we live in is sort of a shared experience. Not sort of, it definitely is, but that there are certain buffering agents and mitigating agents that drown out things that create a unity, right, between us, to where when we're going through altruistic or benevolent purposes, those leaders are assassinated and killed off one way or the other. People that stand for certain movements, so you have to be diluted. You have to be Mr. Beastified, where you don't have much. And I'm not putting him down, because I'll watch his videos too. There's a time and place for everything, and there's definitely a time and place for you to kick your feet up and forget about things, especially when you're exhausted under the weight of heavy intellectual movements, right? So answer her, I'm sorry, can I please donate $20 to you? I love your live. Do you? I mean, are you playing? I don't really I'm not hurting too bad. I would say you know what I would say? Please, everybody, go make someone's day. Go on their channel, not me. I mean, I know I fit this description. Go on someone's channel that barely has any subscribers. Start a movement and make their videos go viral. And even if you don't want to watch it, keep it playing and trick the system. Fuck those motherfuckers, right? Excuse my expletives. They aren't our bosses. We, the people, right? When we exercise our ability to support one another, right? Like, you could make someone's life. Do you realize that? Someone who's in the dark. It looks like I'm in the dark, but the light's coming through me. Can you feel me? Can you feel me? I feel energized. So I would say that is something that I'm working on, and I was expressly bitten by this bug by the interview that I just watched. Olav Phillips. Was it Peterson? I could be wrong. Yeah. I think it's Olav Phillips, and I think I got that wrong several times. But Through a Glass Darkly, Sean Patrick Hazlitt, really awesome interviews on there. I would say, instead of looking at somebody who even has a few thousand subscribers, look at someone who's brand new and make a video viral. Make it so people are scratching their heads going, why is this video going viral? Put some money in some people's pockets that really need attention, right? They need that affirmation. For me, I'm really just trying to express myself on a station. I actually pulled this channel off 2 months ago. Something inspired me to rekindle it and put it back on. But yeah, so I appreciate you, Kelly. I do. Kelly, I appreciate you. I like your type of antagonism. We need this. we don't need affronting belligerent statements, but in making those belligerent statements, and I'm not saying that you are, I'm saying maybe Tim, but maybe Tim is someone who's just reaching out. Maybe Tim needs somebody to go on his channel and give him some love, right? So out of the earlier expression that I had as a secondary plant metabolite in defense of what he was saying, do you slap kids? That's an affronting thing to say, right? No, I don't slap kids. And no, I don't believe in that. I believe in a society that cultivates truth from the beginning. Like from a physiological standpoint, we need to teach people frontal plane movement, right? How to walk side to side and get your glute medius involved, get your tensor fasciolata firing, right? We need to teach people how to avoid doing circumductive movements with the shoulders, right? Little kids need to be shown these things so that they're not sent out into the multi-billion-dollar industry that feeds off them through pharmacological means, through shoulder, hip, knee replacement, hip replacement. How many athletes? I know you know some people yourself. It doesn't matter who you talk to. MCL, ACL surgery, you know someone, right? So it's like we need to be strengthened from a physical sense on that. But then there's also metaphysics, educational and intellectual things that we're being barred from, such as financially. Most people aren't even told about how important like a credit score is, right? It's like you go into, at least I'm totally dating myself and I'm old as shit. Don't worry about it. Is home economics. That was where we would learn how to balance a checkbook and shit like that. It's like, that didn't pan out. That wasn't pertinent to anything. Like they should be teaching blockchain and cryptocurrency, or they should give you the ability to choose that elective and go outside the school system, you see? But the problem is then you get into Rudolf Steiner's Waldorf schools, right? Where he was teaching you things that were real, that were about reincarnation in your lifetime. He was teaching you real practical knowledge, right? That if you were taught these things early on or given the opportunity to, you would have turned into something that was very threatening to any state or any dictatorial totalitarian government system, right? So that's what I would like to see. I would like to see people exalted, small channels, small stations, where you make their videos go viral, and you keep pumping them and keep telling your friends about them and let them know that you are doing. And that is like, if you want to say what is God, try being like that and tell me you don't feel God, and tell me you won't get addicted to that, because you will. And then you want to know what happens? You break the capitalistic system. You're no longer being selective about, oh, I'm going to alienate this person. I'm going to marginalize this person. You know what? I don't even need to know you, because I don't know you in your current form. In other words, we are all subjected to a lack of development. They rely on it. It's why we wake up and put up with the same shit over and over again. The second that you say, I'm not going to do this anymore, you have to take a stand, And it doesn't have to turn into Tiananmen squares. See, at this time, before we lose all our rights for freedom of expression, right? So there are good things and bad things about the temporary status of the Constitution of the United States. That is a globalized effort. It's a globalized systematic effort. In other words, when you say that things have become westernized, you're talking about that. And I'm a living contradiction, right? Just in my use of carnivore, right? So what I demand is I want to get away from that, and I demand superior methods of being able to get, if you're familiar with the term orthomolecular nutrition, that was coined more specifically by Billy J. Saley, heal with amino acids and nutrients. And to make such claim is illegal. It's illegal to say, even though amino acids, the building blocks of life, right, is taught on a scientific scale, to say that you can heal diseases, right, that you can turn things around simply by understanding how to best utilize, because amino acids compete with one another. So what do? She was on the President's Council for stress disorder, right? I know I don't have all that. So I'm going to, I think, have another cup of coffee, maybe make a protein shake, come back on live again. I'll schedule some live events. If there's anything that you want to talk about, right? I invite whoever wants to come on. All you have to do during lives is I have to have, I think, an email or something, and then invite you, or you invite me. You invite me. You can see all my information on my page there. You invite me, and I'll come on. And I've scrapped. I've been through things in my life. I know I'm walking into a dark alley. I ain't putting up with it. I'm like, okay, I know what this is. Thanks for the invite. I'm going back to my walking and staying positive, but I'm not overly guarded, and I definitely like to talk about a myriad of different subjects, and I like to learn and be taught, right? And in that, there's a dialectical exchange. We go into the coitus of conversation, right? So that's something that's left out, where people are hailed and celebrated for going into certain diatribes and spitting vitriol about other people, right? That it breeds a certain type of evil, right? But when we are supporting one another, right? And particularly, I'm not saying support me, give me $20. I'm really okay. I seem pathetic walking around in a dark room, but I've been doing this for 4.5 months, and I've lost probably 40 pounds while I've done that. I train, and it's part of a prescriptive exercise program that I'm on. And when I go off this live, I'm going to be doing like backward walking. I'm going to be doing circumductive movements. I'll have my hands free, and I might even do some shoulder pressing movements with band exercises, and might do some pull-ups. And all these things are very interesting, because when we get into cosmology, and that's what I could really start my next live with, is when you get into astral theological studies, even getting down to zodiac, there are certain personas and personality traits that are expressed into the embryonic state of not just human beings and animals that we see animate on the level that we're existent on from the metaphysical standpoint, but when you go down to the deep molecular scale, bioelectrical scale, you see these types of behaviors exhibited with anthrobots and xenobots, where they are expressing a certain character, if you will. So there's a classification of when people and entities in specific are born, right, going through the first formative stages of their birth, and how all of this works in a sort of I'm obviously not using a standard model of physics expression here, but there seems to be kind of a string theory occurring here. And the interesting studies done on vortex mathematics, you could look into, I think it's just vortex mathematics, the vortices, right? And you see like this sort of donut ring shape that you could equate to primer field energy, primer bowls, where these bowls are literally just electrified, and you see the behavior of rotation, right? Gravitation with non-metallic spherols, right? That have no metal in them, and they start to orbit around a central electromagnetic Helios type system like the sun. So peace be with you. Thank you for tuning in. And I think we're going to focus a little bit more on some more esoteric ideas next time. Be well.